Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra.
Welcome to this Wednesday's edition of Market Mantra, the program in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. I'm Arjun Chaudhary and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Vishal Sharma.
नमस्कार, मार्केट मंत्र में आप सभी का स्वागत। प्रतिदिन की तरह आज भी हम आर्थिक, व्यापारिक और शेयर बाजार से जुड़े ताजा समाचार आप तक लेकर आएंगे और उन पर चर्चा भी करेंगे। आज हमारे साथ चर्चा में विशेषज्ञ भी जुड़ेंगे और सबसे पहले हेडलाइंस के साथ है अर्जुन चौधरी।
Rising for the third straight day, Sensex shoots up 790 points, Nifty spurts 212 points, rupee appreciates by 30 paise against the US dollar. Asian Development Bank projects India's GDP growth to 11% in the current fiscal. And India has adopted a whole-of-society approach to digital technology and improve public services, citizen engagement and accountability, says IT Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad.
लगातार तीसरे कारोबारी सत्र में तेजी से सेंसेक्स में 790 अंक का उछाल, निफ्टी 212 अंक चढ़ा, रुपए में डॉलर के मुकाबले 30 पैसे की मजबूती। एशियाई विकास बैंक ने चालू वित्त वर्ष में भारत के सकल घरेलू उत्पाद की वृद्धि दर 11% रहने का अनुमान व्यक्त किया और केंद्रीय सूचना प्रौद्योगिकी मंत्री ने कहा, भारत ने सार्वजनिक सेवाओं में सुधार, नागरिक सहभागिता और जवाबदेही के क्षेत्र में डिजिटल तकनीक के उपयोग के लिए समग्र समाज की अवधारणा अपनाई। बात सबसे पहले सेंसेक्स की। लगातार तीसरे कारोबारी सत्र में आज सेंसेक्स में तेजी रही। बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स 790 अंक की वृद्धि से 1.6% ऊपर 49,734 पर बंद हुआ। नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी 1.4% की बढ़त से 212 अंक उछलकर 14,865 पर जा पहुंचा। व्यापक बाजार में भी तेजी रही। बीएसई मिड कैप इंडेक्स 1% और स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स 0.7% लाभ में रहे।
At the stock markets, rising for the third straight day, Sensex at the Bombay Stock Exchange shot up 790 points, 1.6% to end at 49,734. Nifty at the National Stock Exchange spurted 212 points, 1.4% to 14,865. In the broader market, the BSE Mid Cap Index advanced 1% and the Small Cap Index rose 0.7%. Among sectoral indices on the BSE, the BankX shot up 3%. Finance Index spurted 2.9%. Auto Index advanced 1.8%. Telecom Index added 1.5%. Consumer Durables and the Utilities indices rose 1.3% each and the Power Index gained 1.2%. Among the declining indices, the Realty Index lost 0.5% and the Metal Index fell 0.3%. Now we're joined by Avinash Gorak Shakkar, Market Analyst on our program Market Mantra. Avinash, a very warm welcome to Market Mantra.
Yeah, good evening.
Avinash, how would you look at this bull run in the market rising for the third straight day, really led by Bajaj Financial Services fourth quarterly results, which led to the BankX going up by 3%. How would you describe the market? Is it sustainable for the remainder of the week?
Yeah, I think, the markets have gone up largely because, the fourth quarter's result season has been much better than what the street has expected. And I think, apart from Bajaj Finance, which actually showed very strong numbers, the business commentary was also very encouraging. And that is the reason the stock was in limelight today. And I would believe that, the management was quite hopeful that barring COVID, if things become normal, then I think the disbursements as well as the kind of margins could improve significantly ahead. I think overall the banking and NBFC, PAT has done significantly better than expectations. We saw results of Axis Bank, again a very strong number, a very strong growth coming from the retail book. ICICI Bank was also very strongly, it also reported very strong numbers. So overall, I think the mood in the financial services PAT is extremely strong. We would believe that, whatever, growth numbers have come in, the sustainability of these numbers is now going to be important. From most of the management commentaries, it comes to very clear, observations that the numbers would be better, but hopefully once COVID subsides. So, if COVID continues in the month of May or maybe even June, and if partial lockdowns get implemented across various states, then that could obviously impact the business going ahead. Overall, as far as the market is concerned, I think it's a combination of some value buying in financials, in NBFCs, but I think a lot of the buying has also come due to short covering. And I think liquidity from the FIs has again turned positive. Like today, the FI number has been positive after a very long period. So I believe that, at least in the very near term, the index could definitely remain in the positive territory. But I think it would be better if investors focus on quality stocks and numbers on companies where financials are going to be much stronger in Q4. So that would be the trend at least in the coming week or two. And I think till the time COVID doesn't subside, markets will continue to remain volatile.
Apart from private banking, what about the PSU banking index? That also went up by 2.58% in today's trade. What are the fundamentals expected when they report their fourth quarter earnings now?
Yeah, I think as far as the PSU banks are concerned, I think, amongst the larger banks like, State Bank of India, PNB, these banks are expected to report very strong set of numbers. In fact, PNB Housing, reported very strong numbers yesterday. And I think that gives a clear indication that both the housing demand as well as the core, corporate demand for loans has increased significantly. But I think one factor which investors should keep in mind is that the Supreme Court judgment of interest on interest is now going to be impacting most of the PSU banks, because wherever interest has been accounted, they will have to reverse their entries, and to that extent their profitability could be slightly impacted. But I think among the smaller banks, I think one should be a little careful, because there the asset quality could be a little problematic for them. As of now, these banks are not yet completely out of the woods, and I think investors should focus on the larger banks, PNB, or for that reason SBI, Bank of Baroda. These are banks which I think would come out with significantly better numbers. But overall, the private sector banks would definitely shine better compared to the PSU banks.
Do you also believe that the short covering positions that investors took today is because of the FNO expiry on the 29th? Clearly, they have opted for the call option in the options market. Is that why they are buying heavily into the cash market right now?
Yeah, I think my sense is the markets had, in the previous 1 or 2 weeks shown a significant amount of beating down due to COVID-related issues. I think what the market is excited is that from the 1st of May, vaccination is going to be increased significantly. People above 18 years are going to be vaccinated also. So the number of vaccinations and the run rate could increase significantly. And I think, the market is hopeful that by end of May, the COVID, across India, that is across most of the states like Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, could possibly see some peak out levels. So I think markets are clearly hoping that by end of May, we could see COVID peaking out the second wave. And that is something which is making the markets quite excited. I think vaccinations are going to increase significantly. And I think with this regulation that 18 years above people could also get vaccinated is additionally a plus factor which has sentimentally boosted the market sentiment. So it's going to be a wait and watch. But I think markets would see reasonable bouts of buying. And I think the near-term resistance for the market would be 15,000 for the Nifty. And I think thereafter, I think it's going to be clearly what happens on COVID, what happens on the vaccination run rate. These things would be, observed once the result season are over.
What about the FMCG index? Do you think there was a short selling today? We had Britannia fourth quarter numbers reported, yet we saw fundamentally with the stock showing good numbers, good reporting, the value fell. So is it because of the FNO expiry coming up, or is there some other position being taken?
I think largely because of the FNO expiry. And I think as far as Britannia is concerned, I think very clearly, there was a big disappointment on the margins and on the profitability, where the management clearly commented that, they could not record reasonably good margins because of rise in commodity prices, raw material costs. So I would believe at least for the next 1 or 2 quarters, you're going to see FMCG companies, obviously, battling with higher raw material cost. Obviously, input prices have gone up. So, to pass on all those costs at one go is not going to be easy. So apart from Britannia, maybe, other companies also in the FMCG pack may obviously underperform, and you could possibly see a little softening kind of trend in the companies of most FMCG companies.
जी अविनाश, महामारी के इस दौर में जिस तरीके से फार्मा इंडस्ट्री की बात अगर हम करें तो अभी सरकार ने हाल ही में 1-2 दवाइयों को मंजूरी भी दी है, तो आने वाले 2-3 महीने में फार्मा सेक्टर का प्रदर्शन आप कैसे देखते हैं?
फार्मा सेक्टर में हमको लग रहा है कि 2 तरीके के फार्मा कंपनीज बेनिफिट करेंगे। एक तो वैक्सीन जो कंपनी बनाएगी और जो डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करेगी, और दूसरी जो कंपनीज एपीआई बनाती है, जो रॉ मटेरियल होता है फार्मास्यूटिकल सेक्टर के लिए। और अगर वैक्सीन कंपनीज की बात करें तो मुझे लग रहा है कि अभी भी काफी ऐसी कंपनीज है जैसे कि डॉक्टर रेड्डी है, कैडिला है, ग्लैंड फार्मा है, जो वैक्सीनेशन के मैन्युफैक्चर और डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन में काफी पैसा आने वाले 6 से 12 महीने में कमाएगी। हालांकि ये जो वैक्सीन का रेवेन्यू है ये वन टाइम होगा, कोविड खत्म होने के बाद इनको रेवेन्यू नहीं मिलेगा, लेकिन ये इंक्रीमेंटल रेवेन्यू है जो इन कंपनीज को फायदा करेगा। और दूसरी कंपनीज जो एपीआई बनाती है जैसे कि सन फार्मा है, आईओएल केमिकल्स है, लुपिन है, तो यहाँ पे हमको लग रहा है कि एपीआई के प्राइसेस में अच्छी बढ़ोतरी आई है। यहाँ पे पीएलआई स्कीम भी गवर्नमेंट ने अनाउंस किया है, तो मुझे लग रहा है कि ऐसे कंपनीज में निवेशकों को निवेश करना चाहिए, क्योंकि हमको लग रहा है 6 से 12 महीने में फार्मास्यूटिकल कंपनीज को बिजनेस की कोई दिक्कत नहीं होगी। और जैसे हमने सबने कहा है कि ये एक ऐसा प्रोडक्ट है वैक्सीन और एपीआई जो कोविड रिलेटेड डिमांड से इम्पैक्ट नहीं हो चुका है। तो मुझे लग रहा है कि फार्मा एक अच्छा आउट परफॉर्मेंस सेक्टर होगा, प्रोवाइडेड निवेशकों को कम से कम 6 से 12 महीने का टाइम फ्रेम यूज करना चाहिए।
जी, अविनाश गोरक्षकर, हमसे बात करने के लिए आपका धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू।
और अब रुक करते हैं रुपए के प्रदर्शन की ओर। विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार में डॉलर के मुकाबले रुपया आज 30 पैसे मजबूत होकर 74 रुपए 35 पैसे के स्तर पर पहुंच गया। बात एशियाई बाजारों की करें तो एशियाई बाजारों में आज मामूली बढ़त रही। निवेशकों को अमेरिकी फेडरल रिजर्व की नीति संबंधी बैठकों के नतीजों की प्रतीक्षा है। जापान का निकेई और सिंगापुर का स्ट्रेट्स टाइम्स इंडेक्स 0.2% लाभ में रहे। चीन का शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स 0.4% चढ़ा। हांगकांग का हैंगसेंग 0.5% की बढ़त में रहा, जबकि दक्षिण कोरिया के कोस्वी में 1.1% की गिरावट दर्ज हुई। यूरोप में प्रमुख बड़े बैंकों के मजबूत नतीजे आने के बाद जबरदस्त आय की उम्मीदों से यूरोपीय बाजार आज ऊपर कारोबार करते दिखे। अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार के दौरान लंदन का FTSE 100 0.2% लाभ में चल रहा था। फ्रांस का कैक 0.4% और जर्मनी का डेक्स 0.3% की बढ़त के साथ कारोबार कर रहे थे।
And moving on to the U.S. Market, Wall Street key indices ended a little change yesterday as optimism about a global economic recovery was dented by caution before the policy decision by the U.S. Federal Reserve and earnings updates from a number of blue chip companies. Corporate earnings in Europe are expected to have risen 61% in the first quarter, while U.S. profits are seen up more than 31% according to the latest Refinitiv IBES estimates. Some analysts say the recent rally has made stocks vulnerable to profit-taking, given lofty valuations and high expectations going into the reporting season. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained just 3 points to close at 33,985, but the S&P 500 ended marginally lower at 4,187, and the Nasdaq Composite Index dropped 49 points to 14,019. On this, we're joined by Editorial Director of Business Standard, Shri A.K. Bhattacharya. A warm welcome to your Market Mantra, AKB.
Thank you.
AKB, let's just begin with the valuation of the rupee, which had depreciated earlier, but now we are seeing a trend of appreciation, and it appreciated by 30 paise against the US dollar today. What were the reasons?
Well, I think the intervention in the market and the fact that the RBI has been an active agent in flooding dollars into the market by buying rupees, and that has certainly helped. And apart from that, probably the expectation that the OPEC OPEC Plus meeting has been postponed, and the cut that was withdrawn, that 8 million barrels per day cut that was to be withdrawn, will now be withdrawn over a phased period. So therefore, the earlier shock that would have come in an abrupt way would come over a phased period of time. The two combined is probably helping the Indian rupee at this point in time, but I think it will be a temporary phenomenon.
What do you expect from the meeting of the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the U.S., and its impact not only on the U.S. Economy's money supply, but on the valuation of the dollar to the rupee?
Well, I think there is no major change in the stance of the Fed likely, and there is no there should be no apprehension that there would be an increase in the interest rates right now. So the earlier fears that the monetary easing may begin. So I think that those apprehensions should be set aside for the time being. As if the interest rates are not raised, then that money will surely find its way to the emerging markets, including India. So that, to my mind, is likely expectation from the Fed's meeting.
FIIs have been net sellers in the market, at least yesterday. Today, of course, we have provisional data coming in. What is the diversion of investment? Is it into the equity market or the bond market, especially with the Federal Reserve's bond buying program?
Well, the real exit, the exit has happened from the equities market. So if you look at the debt market as well as the equity market in India, you will see the FPI has withdrawn more from the equities rather than the debt. It is just this is just the reverse scenario from a year ago situation. That's because the expectation is that the Indian stock markets will remain a little turbulent and uncertain for the next few weeks because of the COVID situation. On the contrary, the debt mutual funds are looking relatively sturdy if they are backed with strong paper.
AKB, we're also seeing a sink in the valuation of securities market, whether it's the Sensex and Nifty followed by the Asian markets and the US markets, but what's also fundamentally similar is the corporate earning results for both European companies and US companies, where you have figures like 61% increase for corporate earnings in Europe, and US companies seeing profits of more than 31%. Why is that the case?
Well, I think this was a year when the top line grew at a much lower level than the bottom line. That's because the companies had pricing power. The supply side was little squeezed, and because the supply side was squeezed, and as the economy came back into its earlier scale of operations, there was more demand for goods and services, and many of these companies took full advantage of that, and which is why you see a sharp divergence between what they actually sold, which is the top line, and what they actually profited, which is the bottom line. That is also the story of the Indian corporate sector, where the top line growth is not that good, but the bottom line growth is quite substantial.
Also, where does China figure in all this? They had reported strong macroeconomic numbers for the month of March. Experts have cited that domestic consumption has led to it more than exports to countries like the United States, where they have depended more on foreign exchange earnings. Now you have figures also about China's population declining for the first time since 1949. So economically, where does China stand in the global market?
We should not be underestimating where the might of China, even after taking into account the fact that the Chinese population may be on a decline for the first time. Remember that the Chinese growth engine has shifted direction in the sense that it is now relying a lot on investments and less on consumption, and is relying more on the domestic market and less on the global markets. So these directional change in the economy has seen that the Chinese authorities cross that major hump in a post-COVID scenario. So I think it's a directional shift, and that shift will continue, and till 2025. Probably, if you look at their overall, the 14th Chinese development plan, which was just revealed about a week or 10 days ago, you will see that they are far less robust, far less aggressive in forecasting the kind of growth rates that they had seen earlier. You will be surprised to know that the growth rate that they project on an annual average basis from now to 2035 is actually less than 5%.
And what about Joe Biden's relationship with the government of India? Of course, there is diplomacy and the exchange of raw materials for the manufacture of medicines and vaccines, but there are disputes regarding intellectual property rights, the assignment of it, and of course, currency manipulation charges.
There is nothing that has substantially changed between China and India and the US, because the core issues that used to define the relationship between India and the US, they continue to be as important for the policymakers to bring them under their consideration. If you look at the currency manipulation charge, I think that charge is a completely bogus charge right now, because India has neither a current account deficit at this point in time, nor does it have a currency that is appreciating. So in both counts, that charge that was levied some weeks ago, that currency manipulator charge, that is no ground for continuation. Having said that, the relationship between India and China has always been transactional, and after initial bans on the U.S. exports of raw materials for vaccines, etc., which was defended by the U.S. government authorities, a top-level discussion between the Prime Minister of India and the U.S. President helped resolve the issues, and some relaxations have been granted, and even the promise that a large part of the 60 million extra AstraZeneca vaccines that lie unused in the U.S. markets will be shifted to India. So these are, this is par for the course as far as India-America relationships are concerned.
Well, let's have a look at our second headline story. The Asian Development Bank has projected India's GDP growth to rebound strongly to 11% in the current fiscal on the back of continued economic recovery boosted by increased public investment, vaccine rollout and surge in domestic demand. This forecast assumes that vaccines are deployed extensively across the country and the second wave of the coronavirus pandemic is contained. In its latest flagship economic publication, Asian Development Outlook ADP forecasts India's economic growth to moderate to 7% in the financial year 2022 as base effect disappears. Domestic demand is expected to remain the main driver of growth this fiscal. A faster vaccine rollout will boost urban demand for services, while rural demand will be boosted by robust agriculture growth and continued government support to farmers by expanding irrigation, improving value chains and increasing farm loan limits.
भट्टाचार्य जी, सरकार टीकाकरण अभियान में तेजी लाने की बात कर रही है और ये माना जा रहा है कि टीकाकरण पर जीडीपी का 0.32% खर्च का अनुमान है, ये लगाया जा रहा है और इससे अर्थव्यवस्था में उछाल की उम्मीद तो हम कर ही सकते हैं और साथ ही साथ जो टीकाकरण पर जो खर्च होगा वो एक तरीके से जीडीपी को बचाने के लिए किए गए निवेश की तरह माना जा सकता है। तो क्या अब समय आपको ऐसा लगता है कि आ गया है कि अर्थनीति के केंद्र में जन स्वास्थ्य, खासकर महामारियों से निपटने और आवश्यक बुनियादी ढांचे पर सरकार का जोर रहने वाला है?
आपने एकदम सही कहा है कि जो टीकाकरण जो है वो हमारी इस वक्त केंद्रीय सरकार के लिए एक बहुत बड़ा एक अभियान बनना चाहिए। सरकार के बजट में 35,000 करोड़ का प्रावधान किया गया था, पर अगर इस वक्त हम पिछले हफ्तों में अगर हम बहुत सारे बयान को तरफ नजर दें, मुझे ये लग रहा है कि जो 35,000 करोड़ का पूरा खर्चा नहीं होगा, क्योंकि 18 साल से 44 साल तक की टीकाकरण का जो रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी जो है वो प्रदेशों के ऊपर पहुंच गया है। तो मैं समझता हूं कि वैक्सीनेशन टीकाकरण का प्रोग्राम एक सामग्रिक, एक नेशनल एक प्रोग्राम होना चाहिए, जिससे कि क्योंकि ये हमारी देश की स्वास्थ्य को वापस लाने में और कोविड को से फाइट करने में बहुत बड़ा एक अहम भूमिका निभा सकता है, और इसमें स्टेट्स को अलग अलग काम करने देने से इसमें कमी आ सकती है, और केंद्र को पूरी तरह से इसका पूरा जो लीडरशिप लेना चाहिए, मैं समझता हूँ.
Let's move on to our next story on agriculture, where we have the Ministry of Agriculture and Family Welfare informing us.
जी, कृषि और किसान कल्याण मंत्रालय ने बताया है कि कृषि अवसंरचना कोष के लिए 8,216 करोड़ रुपए से अधिक के 8,665 आवेदन प्राप्त हुए हैं. इसमें प्राथमिक कृषि ऋण समितियों का 58% हिस्सा है. इसके बाद कृषि उद्यम और किसानों ने आवेदन किया है. इस कोष के जरिए कृषि परियोजनाओं में निवेश के लिए मध्यम और दीर्घावधि के लिए ब्याज दर में छूट के साथ ऋण सुविधा प्रदान की जाएगी. इस योजना के तहत बैंक और वित्तीय संस्थाओं के जरिए 1 लाख करोड़ रुपए 3% वार्षिक ब्याज दर से ऋण के तौर पर उपलब्ध कराए जाएंगे. साथ ही 2 करोड़ रुपए तक के ऋणों पर क्रेडिट गारंटी कवरेज भी दिया जाएगा.
Let's have a look at a third headline story. Union Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad has said India has adopted a whole-of-society approach to digital technology and improve public services, citizen engagement and accountability. He was virtually addressing the UN high-level thematic debate on digital cooperation and connectivity at the United Nations General Assembly. The minister shared India's experiences in achieving digital inclusion and use of technology for empowerment of citizens. He said Digital India program was launched in 2015 to bring digital inclusion and empower ordinary citizens. The minister added that digitization helped India in accelerating financial inclusion. He further stated that the COVID pandemic has brought out the critical need of cutting-edge technology tools and innovation in the areas of tele-education and telemedicine. And let's have a look at the oil market now. Global crude oil prices rose today amid optimistic forecasts of a global fuel demand recovery, while a rapid spread of COVID-19 infections in India and a bigger than expected build in U.S. crude stocks capped gains. So Brent crude futures rose 28 cents to trade at $66.70 a barrel. The U.S. crude futures gained 29 cents to $62.23 a barrel. An OPEC Plus decision to stick to plans for a phased easing of oil production restrictions from May to July underscored the producers' confidence in a recovery in global demand. Meanwhile, in its research note, U.S. bank Goldman Sachs expects the biggest jump in oil demand ever, a 5.2 million barrels per day rise over the next 6 months, citing an acceleration of vaccinations in Europe and an unleashing of pent-up travel demand. AKB, very briefly, do you agree with this Goldman Sachs report? Because there are experts who are giving a contrarian view that the supply does not match the demand.
I don't think so. I think the vaccination program and the recovery that you are expecting in Europe as well as the US, which is a big market, means that the demand for oil will go up. And I would say that yes, 6% growth in global oil demand compared to 6 or 7% decline in the oil demand last year is par for the course, and one would expect that trajectory.
जी, और अब बात गोल्ड की. सोने की कीमतों में आज लगातार 5वें दिन गिरावट रही. मल्टी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंज पर जून महीने के लिए सोने का वायदा मूल्य 208 रुपए की कमी से 47,095 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम पर आ गया. मई अनुबंध के लिए चांदी भी 812 रुपए टूटकर 68,146 रुपए प्रति किलो पर रही. AK भट्टाचार्य जी, आप कार्यक्रम में शामिल हुए और चर्चा के लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
Namaskar.
And before we close, a reminder of the headlines. Rising for the third straight day, Sensex shoots up 790 points. Nifty spurts 212 points. Rupee appreciates by 30 paise against the US dollar. Asian Development Bank projects India's GDP growth to 11% in the current fiscal. And India has adopted a whole-of-society approach to digital technology and improved public services, citizen engagement and accountability, says IT Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad. And that's it in this edition of Market Mantra. For now, goodbye.
Market Mantra. Market Mantra.